And thanks for joining us today on a special episode of VoteProPot-Cast that we are devoting entirely to cannabis in sports. Now, those of us who are not active in professional or competitive sports know firsthand the pain and suffering that can be a part of not just the playing, but the preparing and the competitive nature of sports, and how that can inflict on people's lives. Nobody understands this better than us, except actual athletes and trainers and coaches and sports writers and people who are actually sports. Connected to athletics.
And who
but
else,
other than
Phil?
that,
and maybe the fans.
Well, service members, they're probably in there too. But having said that, we've decided to bring in somebody who really understands sports and cannabis just about better than any other person I can think of. We have as our very special guest today an Emmy Award-winning producer and veteran sports broadcaster in the New England area, and host of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. We're very pleased to have with us Jimmy Young.
Hey, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Hey, guys. Great to see you. Great to hear you again. And I'm looking forward to it. I love that intro, though. I got to tell you, that was right on. Okay. And I swear, I, too, was an athlete at some point, right?
Right.
I played college sports, okay? I made college varsity soccer in 1976. So that means I'm old.
Let's tell folks why we have you on to talk about sports, Jimmy. Jimmy is the founder and the CEO of the Pro Cannabis Media, which is awesome. You need to check that out. He's going to tell us about it in a second. He does Weed Talk with Kurt Dalton, who's the founder of Cannabis.net. Great show. You can't miss it.
Great website.
Yeah, really good stuff. And he comes from a background in sportscasting. So tell us a little bit about how you went from there to cannabis.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. The story all began with a sports-centric podcast aggregation network that is CLNS Media. Now, CLNS Media was started by a guy named Nick Gelso because CLNS stands for Celtics Late Night Sports, which was his original podcast in 2003. In other words, when he started, he had to explain to people what a podcast was.
I was going to say.
Right?
What a pod was.
Right, exactly. Isn't that little white thing, that white thing? iPad, iPod, or something, right? So our Behind the Media, I did a podcast with a former White House correspondent named Dan Lothian. He was for CNN, and he lives in Wellesley, which is where my office is, where I'm talking to you guys from, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And we did a Behind the Media podcast for about a little over a year, and we distributed it on CLNS Media. And sure enough, March 2018, the New England Cannabis Convention is going on in Boston on the weekend, and the Nick Gelso, the CEO, and I happen to run into each other. He says, why don't you go down there and do a podcast on cannabis? And I'm like, what? What? Where? What? First of all, I said, where's my cassette recorder? Because I didn't have, right. How the hell am I going to get a recording of that, right? Isn't that what I used to do that? I swear, or at least I had friends who did it. Anyway, so he showed me the little doohickey thingy that you can attach to your iPhone and app and download it and record. And so I went down there with a microphone. I met some amazing people. I walked in. I was blown away by the size of the convention, 350 exhibitors, and the fact that there were so many ancillary businesses around the cannabis industry. I had no idea. You guys know kind of my story that, I've been a regular user for 38 of the 62 years of my life. 14 to 30 every day, and then from 40 to present, just about every night, too. And I have a medical card in Massachusetts. I have horrific arthritis, and that's how I qualified for it. So doing that podcast happens in March of 2018. And then I find out that YouTube just purged their site of all the cannabis-related videos that were making money in April of 2018 for them.
Those bastards.
Right? So I had audio
I
and
heard
video.
about that.
Right. I had audio and video, and I didn't know what the hell to do with it. Who's going to watch it? How do you do it? What's this SoundCloud thing?
Yeah, right.
What is it? What audio boom? Anyway, so they walked me through it. I posted it on CLNS Media. I also found out about this new site called the Weed Tube, and they took my video versions of my podcast. So all of a sudden, April 2018, May 2018, I'm starting to do these once a week, and it's caught on. You know what? I can't believe that there are people out there actually that will download it and listen to me.
Oh, it's great stuff. What's your long-term goal with?
So let me. Well, there's a lot has gone on since March of 2018, as you guys have know some of my story.
Heck yeah.
But let's go to the present with Pro Cannabis Media. We are a group of like-minded internet sites that are pro-cannabis. I am disgusted with my former traditional media comrades and how they treat this business. They are looking for this business to fail so they can lead their news with it, okay? They are looking for the new industry to make mistakes so they can lead their news with it, okay? They are not balanced in their reporting. They are not telling the stories of the cannabis industry at all. They're telling the stories of the cannabis screw-ups is how they're approaching it. Because if it bleeds, it leads. Motivation? If it bleeds, it leads in media. They all get paid based on audience. How many people, how many eyeballs, how many times, reach and frequency. That's Media 101. All media is conduits for information and content. You guys we're creating content now. We're going to push it out on media, and people are going to download it. And believe it or not, they're actually going to listen to it and react to it or engage with it or whatever. They're going to listen to it. Great. And then ultimately, you can actually charge people who are looking for that audience a cost per 1,000 eyeballs, a cost per 1,000 people. And that's the unit of measurement in all media. And the internet is the first media where you can actually track it. So it's the back-end data now that is so valuable to the marketers in the various advertising groups. So a group is bigger than one, correct?
Absolutely.
It's the professor in me. Okay, good. Thank you, class.
What a bunch of dummies are in class.
He liked my answer best.
So Cannabis.net is our flagship. Our original distributor was CLNS Media. They're still with us. But Cannabis.net is the #3 most popular website in this cannabis space. Right behind
we love it.
Leafly and Weed.
It's a great site.
And, well, it's everything. More people spend 23 minutes on average on that site, reading and digging up information about just about anything you want to know.
I know I do.
Right?
And it's entertaining.
Right. And Kurt is a great writer. He's
really good.
He's a really good writer. He's a funny guy.
Yeah.
And he's 20 years younger than me, so he's much more hip. Okay? Much more hip.
Well, we're all the same age, by the way. The four of us.
Us. We are.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So we remember the 60s and 70s. That's the best part, right? You don't have to read about those decades.
Oddly, I remember the 60s better than I remember the 70s.
Yeah, why is that, I wonder?
I don't know.
Well, let me just say something related to what you just said about the media.
Yep.
We interviewed just like 2 weeks ago Jen Michelle Padini, and she's the head of the Virginia chapter of NORML.
Okay.
And there's been some huge changes here in Virginia, in the last couple of months. Huge. Right. I have not seen any coverage of it on the television news, the radio, even
on the local,
even local newspapers. And we asked her that why, and she kind of said the same thing you did.
Right.
I mean,
it doesn't bleed.
Right.
It doesn't bleed.
That's right.
It's not a story.
But here's the thing, guys, and this is why I started my company. Everybody has a cannabis story. And how many times have you heard the following? Cannabis has saved my life, or cannabis has changed my life. And those stories are not being told. So we want to tell those stories. In fact, one of our little marketing tools is going to be send us your cannabis story in under 90 seconds. And if we deem it well, we will share it with others.
Yeah, that's a really good.
But
we
that's
might steal
the
that.
balance. That is the balance. That's what's missing. The other thing that's missing, and you saw a great example of it at the Super Bowl last year, when Acreage Holdings tried to pay for a
run an ad.
PSA, right?
That's right.
And there were there were 3 compelling stories on that in that PSA.
Right.
And of course, CBS nixed it. And that's what pissed me off. It pisses me off to no end.
Yeah.
It's like, if media is going to be balanced, factual storytelling, you can't tell me that they're doing that now because of the commercial aspect of it, which basically means if you are on public television, or, that at least is supposed to be not commercially driven, but they're driven by your tax dollars and also, donations and stuff like that. But it's a fascinating thing in the business because I want to hear these stories told. And I have heard them, and we put them on my website, and we talk about them, we blog about them, and Kurt Dalton, finds stories out before anybody knows about. He knew about
he does
Stormy.
a great job.
He knew about Stormy resigning before it even hit the New York Post.
That's the first place I saw it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Jimmy, how much of that is there some factor in there of old world thinking? That, we were all raised to believe that smoking pot is a bad thing and bad people did it.
The stigma.
Is it? I mean, is there something to that in addition to just the dollars and cents of media and marketing?
There is a, you guys know this, right? We have seen more aspects of racism in this country over the last few years than the 60s and 70s combined, guys. And it was bad in the 60s and 70s, okay? It's in other words, it's part of, it's institutionalized stigma, I guess the best way, an institutionalized prejudice against cannabis.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, but it's here, it's there. They won't admit it. And I have friends, by the way, that are news directors in the Boston market. I mean, I've talked to them about this. I said, would you guys be interested in a cannabis beat reporter? And of course, yeah, sure, maybe. No. No, it's a big no, and So
A hard no.
it's a catch-22 for the media because it's a slow process for people to accept this, and what we need are the C-level leaders of business and in industry to admit that they've actually been using cannabis for 10 years, 30 years, however long.
Whatever, yeah.
And they don't want to do that. I have a dear friend who owns a business. He's not only is he pro cannabis, he grows it in his garage, okay? And I asked him, would you really? Why don't you sponsor my podcast? Oh, no, I don't know. I can't. I'm afraid of what my customers might think. I'm like, what, that you're cool?
Yeah, right.
that you understand that this is a plant. Okay, and that there are people. It's a plant medicine, and
but that's starting to change. You're seeing more people come out, the Martha Stewarts and the I mean, not just the rock stars, but you're starting to see more people,
and it'll eventually reach a tipping point in public sentiment, and not only will the media be covering it, they'll be clamoring for it.
Right. Well, but not only that. The media will want those advertising dollars, guys. Come on, it's commercial media.
Commercial media, right?
That's one of the reasons why our model of a group of like-minded internet sites has a really good chance of catching on. Because I just downloaded this document that was circulated on the internet today about all the ad policies. Every state has a different policy about advertising, and they don't want calls to action. So you have to do it similarly to public television or infomercial style. Let me tell you the story about Caroline's Cannabis, the first social equity applicant for adult use recreation who got a license in Massachusetts and then now is closed thanks to the governor. But point being is you have to tell the stories, not say, hey, come on down. We've got 25% off today.
Gotcha.
2-for-1 joints. That's what they don't want.
Yeah.
They don't want
they
Billy Mays. I'm sorry. May he rest in peace.
Yeah.
So
want to talk about some sports?
Let's talk about some sports.
So anyway, I want to ask you a question. So how did you celebrate Cinco de Mayo?
That was like the other day, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't like Mexican food, so there's no reason to. And I don't drink beer.
That's a no.
And I don't drink beer. I did know that the day
Tequila?
exists. I did kind of celebrate 420 in quarantine. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Worst 420 ever.
Yeah, we got screwed on that one.
Yeah, it's really, it figures, doesn't it? Everything that can be working against this industry is
Seems like
working
it,
against
right?
this industry. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's pretty, that's why I recognize that all of us, and you guys get this, we're in a historic time right now. We're part of a historic movement. And
Yes, we are.
we're all age appropriate. So,
Right.
you know, we remember sneaking around the corner to smoke
Absolutely.
a joint, right? We remember keeping it and spraying our clothes with, you know, Right Guard or whatever.
Osium.
Right?
Absolutely. I don't know about you guys, but I never saw this coming. Just didn't see it
Well,
coming.
also,
Never did.
well, I remember when you had to whisper about it.
Right.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
You couldn't talk openly.
Right.
And we still have what we call whisper states.
That's right.
Yes,
Where-
that's
Yeah.
right.
That's right.
You can still get arrested.
You know what's amazing though, guys? And here we are in the most unprecedented pandemic in my lifetime, certainly the biggest thing that's ever happened. And it happened during a time when there was momentum in Washington, D.C., right? Who in the million years would think that this pandemic would ever happen? Bill Gates. We all know that
Yeah.
he said it 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, okay, one guy. All right.
He is a smart guy. We all get that too. But that, and sure enough, it has stopped the movement in Washington, D.C., because the Senate, something has to go through the Senate, and the Senate is a dysfunctional group of people right now, let's just say, you know? And by the way, at
think
least
that's
they're
safe to say.
trying to deal with this pandemic. And it's up to everybody
Yeah.
else how they feel about it. But
Right.
you know.
I hear you.
Well, I found that the pandemic has slowed down the process of legalization, but I think it sort of increased the desire to legalize. I think more people are going, we really have to do it now because we have some debt.
Right. And we've been
Yeah.
talking about that. Kurt and I have been talking
we got to
about
create
that.
some jobs.
Right. 100%. Jobs, taxes, and debt. I know just the cure for that. And, a couple weeks ago, we had Bruce Linton, the ex-CEO of Canopy Growth, and Joe Lasardi, the CEO of Curaleaf. And I believe Curaleaf just distributed that interview today, too. And it was, we called it the Legends of Cannabis. And I don't want to leave out Chris Walsh.
I saw that.
From MJ Biz, too, because he's a great guy. And, they have the
Really?
largest
Yeah.
convention. And the conversations between those two guys, Linton and Lusardi, I just sat back and listened.
I watched that.
How the impact not only could be good for the cannabis industry, but even in business now, do big businesses really need to rent all that office space? If there's still companies that are working remotely and doing all these Zoom calls and Zoom meetings and things are getting done and they're making their money and they're operating their models, maybe it's not 100%, but right now nothing's 100%.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what the future in business looks like.
I think you're right.
And cannabis is poised. And Kurt, my partner on Weed Talk, makes it very clear that the worse the recession and depression, the better for cannabis reform. Because that
Well,
means...
if it was anything like the 1930s,
yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Right?
And in 1937, the wrong drug got prohibited. And I wrote a blog about that on my website when I first started this. And I still maintain it, and I still talk about it. And doctors now are telling me that my theory of the fact that everybody's been looking for, when did cancer start? Think about that, guys. We don't know.
When cannabis stopped.
Very good. Very good. That's 100%. That, you can't track it. But the oncologists I've talked to about this, the cannabis experts I've talked about this, think about it. For thousands of years, they used this plant for medicinal purposes. The medicine man, right? Come on. We all know what was going on with those.
shaman.
Right. And we know what was going on with the peace pipes and all this. Come on. So they stopped it. They took that plant out of humanity because the so goes the U.S., so goes the world, right? At least the free world. And our bodies became more susceptible to the carcinogens that our industry filled our environment with and is killing our environment too, I might add, right?
And not only people, but livestock, because hemp was part of the livestock feed for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Big time.
Absolutely. The hemp world and all that, 100%. So look, what the hell? I don't know. I didn't go to med school, but I was just thinking realistically and rationally saying, well, God, if it impacts the endocannabinoid system, which is tied to all mammals, and the system is balancing our neurotransmitters that control our immune system. They control our pain little centers in our brain. And we take that away from 2 generations. And then
that is I had never considered that. And that's a really interesting theory.
Isn't it?
I always figured cancer started because people just started living long enough to die from cancer.
Well, also
before it used to be people just die of other things because they didn't live that long.
Don't forget, we grew up in the Marlboro generation, guys, with the Marlboro Man, right? With cigarettes were cool.
You got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we were told, right?
Humphrey Bogart.
That's
Humphrey Bogart.
right. That's what we were told.
Coolest man on the planet for a long time.
That's what we were told.
I'm curious, Jimmy, from a New Englander's perspective, how bummed are you that Brady is going to be in Tampa Bay instead of Massachusetts Bay?
I'm more bummed. That's right. I am more bummed about how the NFL has to do business and does business than I am about losing Tom. Trust me, guys. 6 Super Bowls. I'm good.
You're good.
All
Yeah.
right.
Tommy doesn't owe you anything.
He didn't owe me anything. He owes me a phone call. That's another story.
Okay.
Bottom line on it is, we being the sports fans of New England, are spoiled rotten. Okay.
Oh yeah.
And we're passionate about our sports. I grew up. I was at Shea Stadium when the ball went through Buckner's legs and had to go into the locker room and ask him, how does he feel? How do you think I feel? You know what he said, guys? This is a great story. I use this all the time. I get to play in the 7th game of the World Series. That was the first thing he thought of. And if you think about resilience and the stories of life and how the story isn't getting knocked down, it's getting off the canvas and coming back, right?
Gotcha.
And even the Michael Jordan special that's on talked about that in the last couple episodes. Resilience and the return to glory is the story that we as fans or modern society love to hear. So
well, Josh Gordon has a comeback story, and it relates to cannabis. He was suspended 2 years?
Right.
For cannabis.
Yep.
And he turned out to have we had a fine career, one of the best wide receivers the Browns ever had.
And you know that Antonio Brown smokes his weed, okay?
He's a stoner.
I'm going out on a limb there, guys, but...
Well, what do you think about the new ratified labor agreement that the NFL just signed?
I'm just disgusted.
Yeah.
Disgusted.
I mean, they claimed that, we're bowing to the union with regard to cannabis, and it really is such a minor change. It's just...
If I was a football player, I wouldn't play another down until I had guaranteed contracts and lifetime health benefits. Right. By the way, that's what unions are
for.
That's what they're for.
Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And think about how big football is, and that the biggest football stars are making maybe 25 to 30 million, and there's only a handful of them, right? Look at baseball, for crying out loud. Baseball's dying because they've overspent and it's crazy how much money those guys make. Now, granted, they're playing 162 games versus 16.
Yeah, but they're not getting their asses kicked every game.
They're not taking years off their lives for something that they love to do, and the owners continue to take advantage of them. That's what pissed me off about this agreement, because they should have, if the players had walked out and strike. They need to do this. They had to. And by the way, wouldn't it be funny if they actually were on strike and the pandemic was here
during
too?
The pandemic.
Right. And that would have been really good, right?
Well, the Redskins would win the Super Bowl because every time they've gone on strike, the Redskins end up winning the Super Bowl.
There you go.
With the scabs.
That's right. The scabs are better than the real players, guys? Is that what you're saying?
They were. That's even the saddest part. No, specifically though, Jimmy, what do you think about the cannabis part of their agreement where,
Thrilled.
I mean, it basically what they did, as I understand it, is you no longer suspended.
Right.
Okay.
They treat it like alcohol, just like baseball is.
Okay. Is that what it is?
That's what. And baseball.
And they've increased the now they only test them basically in the preseason, right?
Right. And they're going to tell them when they're testing them too.
And they're going to tell them when they're testing them. Say, hey guys, don't smoke a joint for a couple weeks.
That's right. Or use your buddy's pee or something.
And they raised the limit how much THC you can have in your blood. But.
Right. So again, there's been movement. There's been acceptance. This is a good sign for the cannabis community that the major sports organizations have recognized it. Think about it. Let's see. Do I want a Percocet or do I want a blunt?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You know?
Especially in football, where these guys, I mean, they play on Sunday, and some of them don't get out of bed till Wednesday. They're so beat up.
I interviewed a former Patriot linebacker named Eric Martin, and he was on one of the Super Bowls, and he admitted to me, and that's public record now, he was smoking weed before he played games. And by the way, he had buddies doing it with him too. Okay?
No shocker.
And as somebody who is a weekend warrior, I'll admit when I played at times in my youth, I was under the influence as well. In fact, the best game I ever had, I had a strained, well, in high school anyway, a strained ligament in my left knee. The trainer taped it so I couldn't bend the knee. It was just in the running position, right?
Okay.
Ooh.
And I went to the hill before the game and had a few tokes and went out and played. And everybody said, Jimmy, you played that was the best game you ever played. And I said, well,
it's because you were hyper-focused.
That's exactly right, Philip. You got it. You got it. Who knew what ADHD was back then, by the way? Right?
Yeah.
Who did? Okay, so I have a couple of little trivia questions. We're going to quiz you guys. I know the answers. Jay and Andrew probably don't. Jimmy, you probably do. And I had 5 questions, but I'm down to 4 because the Major League Baseball agreement was one of them. So,
okay,
the football
where they treat it like alcohol.
Oh, okay.
That was the answer.
Oh,
okay.
Major League Baseball. I didn't have
so,
to Google.
So Jimmy's got one right so far.
I was ready to Google.
You've already got one right. Okay,
I was already Googling. Go ahead. You got another one for me?
All right. I got 4 more questions. Here's number 1. Snowboarder Ross Rabagliati won a gold medal at the Winter Olympics. You know anything about snowboarding?
No.
Okay. All right.
But it was Olympics. But it was at the Olympics.
What way to catch him off guard?
I like the Olympics.
He had his gold medal stripped away because he tested positive for cannabis.
Right. By the way, isn't that a
they
prerequisite?
had to give it back to him because they realized that the ban didn't take place until the following year. Didn't take effect till the following year. What year did Rabagliati win the Olympic gold? Was it 2002 in Salt Lake City? A. Was it B, 1994 in Lillehammer? Or was it C, 1998 in Nagano? Jay and Andrew, you hold up your answers, and Jimmy, you just say.
Just say it? I say C, Nagano.
I see. Jay has got a B, that's incorrect. Andrew has got a C, that's correct. Jimmy, you are correct. 1998 in
I never even
Nagano,
heard of the guy. It was a guess.
and the ban didn't take effect until 1999.
Right.
So they had to give it back.
Now,
interesting.
Which they should never have taken away in the first place, but there it is.
Here's what I know about snowboarding. I believe it's a prerequisite to be high if you're on a snowboard, isn't it?
For me, it is.
Isn't that part of the culture?
Isn't
that part of the culture? Isn't that part of the culture? Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
I mean, you don't have to get high before you snowboard, but it doesn't. But it helps.
Right.
Well, it's sort of the surfer skateboard,
Right.
you know.
Well, it's
thing.
balance, guys. That's balance. Balance.
Right. That's right.
Balance.
It's a very similar culture.
Right. Very
What's your next question, Phil?
Yeah. You got
Next
more?
question.
This
All
is-
right. Which former NFL defensive lineman said regarding cannabis, quote, "It's like oil for the Tin Man," unquote.
Oil for the Tin Man? Is that what you said?
Yeah. That's a quote.
Oh,
It's like
jeez.
talking about cannabis.
Oh,
A former
man.
NFL defensive lineman. Was it A, Howie Long, B, Marvin Washington, or C, Cortez Kennedy?
But it's funny. I would have said Chris Long, actually.
Howie's son.
Okay, just for the record. All right. Cortez Kennedy and who else?
Howie Long, B, Marvin Washington, C,
Marvin
Cortez
Washington.
Kennedy.
Marvin Washington.
Okay, once again, Andrew and Jimmy got it right. Jay got it wrong.
I suck at sports, man.
He was speaking about microdosing. He said he was a lineman for 11 years. I think he played most of the time with the Jets.
Yeah.
But he played with some other, and he is now a cannabis advocate
Right.
and entrepreneur.
And I knew that. Okay, I knew
You knew
that's
that.
how the
Okay,
name.
so
as
that's
soon as
probably-
I heard the name, I was like, "Oh, it's Marvin Washington." Yeah.
Marvin
So,
Washington. Okay.
so let's see if he can stump him for crying out loud. He ain't got one
Well,
wrong
I'm
yet.
doing what I can.
Jeez.
All right.
You could stump me if you anything
This-
within the last 15 years. You got a real good shot at it.
Ask me a question about the Beatles.
Which Beatles smoked pot?
All of the above.
Who turned the Beatles onto pot?
Different subject
Who
for a
smoked
different
weed
day.
with the Grateful Dead? Me.
Bob Dylan.
Did you really?
Oh, I
All
never
right.
told you that
All right,
story.
we got to take a second. You got to tell us about that.
Yeah, well, let's hear that one.
Thank God I was divorced twice, guys. That's all I can tell you. Because I finally found my angel now. But wife number one, when I was in Portland, Maine, I was a CBS sportscaster for the local affiliate in Portland, Maine for 11 years. I was 23 years old when I got the job, and I left when I was 34. Yeah, 11 years later. Do the math, 34. And got to Boston. And Boston was always my career goal, was to come back to my hometown and prove that I could be a sportscaster in my hometown. And I did that, which was great. But then again, let's talk about the Dead. Mid-'80s, the Dead played Oxford Plains Speedway in 1985 or 6, July. And wife number one was the director of sales for a beautiful 5-star inn, still exists, called the Inn by the Sea in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, just south of Portland. And that's where all the stars stayed. I know, Wayne Newton, Bill Cosby. Okay, I get it. But you get what I'm saying. If you're
Well, they were stars. You can't deny that.
absolutely. Right.
They were huge.
So the Dead stayed there when they played Oxford Plains Speedway, and they helicoptered the Dead from Cape Elizabeth, just south of Portland, to the racetrack in Oxford, Maine, which is kind of like in the middle of the state. It was about a 45-minute helicopter ride. And when they came back, the Cape Elizabeth police had this, there's a lot of farms in Maine, a lot of open space. They created a little heliport with their headlights, their cars in a big square, and they bring the helicopter in.
For the helicopter, yeah.
These cops were cool. Okay. They were playing Dark Side of the Moon as they were landing, on their loudspeakers, And out comes Jerry and Bob and Billy Kreutzmann and Dennis McNally, who was a Maine guy. He's their longtime publicist, Dennis McNally, and the late Brent Midland, their keyboardist. And it was about midnight, 12:30. I had done the 11 o'clock news. Where do I go after my news? I either go to a bar or I go to a party. I'm sorry, that's just what we did, right? We were
Explains
wired.
the 3 Ys, by the way.
Right. Well, I'm not 19 years with this one, and we're not married, guys. All right. But
okay.
It is third time is the charm. All right. Anyway, so they come in about 12:30, and sure, because they're superstars, they held dinner for them. The chefs, everybody was on call, and they were taking care of them, and. So Brent Midland and Bill Kreutzmann and Dennis McNally and I had dinner together. We went up to the room, and for the next 3 hours, we discussed which was closer to the North Pole, Portland, Maine, or Portland, Oregon. There's your trivia question. Now, guys, 85, 86, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Google, right?
Couldn't look it up.
Right, couldn't look it up.
If you take it cross country, you got to go through Canada. And 3 hours of this, okay? Needless to say, we smoked plenty of weed, among other things that you did in the 80s, let's just say.
Did the answer get resolved?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is it?
Portland,
Maine. Okay.
Yep.
Well, oddly enough, my next question takes us to Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
Do
you know how Portland, Oregon? Did you know that Portland, Oregon was either going to be named Portland or Boston, and they flipped a coin, and Portland won?
No way.
No kidding. Boston,
That's
Oregon.
another thing that came out that night, all right?
All right. Came out or was made up?
No.
That's far out,
and you
man.
can ask Google. Google knows everything.
All right.
Go ahead.
Hit it.
That Google. Is there anything it doesn't know? After his 2002 arrest for weed possession, which Portland trailblazer earned the nickname Jailblazer? Was it Rasheed Wallace, B, Maurice Lucas, C, Bill Walton?
Well, we all know Walton smoked weed in the 60s and 70s, okay?
Yes.
No doubt about it. He's a deadhead. He's friends with those guys. I don't think it was him. I'm going to say Rasheed Wallace just because he was a Celtic for a day.
Okay, you're saying A, Rasheed Wallace.
Yeah.
Andrew waited until you answered to put up his answer.
No, I already had it by hand.
And it was
a total guess. It was a total guess. I've been playing guessing to see.
Guess
I want to
what?
go there because
Jay got it right too.
I haven't got one yet. I'm going with my man Jimmy right there.
That's correct.
Right.
It was Rasheed Wallace.
Yep.
along with his buddy at the time, Ridenour, or can't remember his name. It's a while back. Anyway, he got nicknamed the Jailblazer.
Well, this is no fun. This game is no fun with Jimmy.
Well, now
All right,
we
let
need
me
a
give you one more
tiebreaker.
question. This hasn't really got to do with.
This is
it's-
one of the highlights of my life, guys. I don't think I've been right about 3 things in my whole life, okay?
Which 1970s All-Star pitcher once threw a no-hitter while tripping balls?
What?
Oh, I know the
I
answer.
heard about that.
It's
If I mention his name, you'll get it.
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. Give me the 3
Was
choices.
it
Give me the
A?
names.
Was it A, Vida Blue?
Nope.
Was it B, Doc Ellis?
Yes.
Yes, it was B, Doc Ellis.
Wow.
Or C,
kidding.
Gaylord Perry. It wasn't Gaylord
It
Perry.
wasn't
was
Gaylord
Doc
Perry.
Ellis.
He was too busy greasing up the ball.
And if you ask me, that ranks with the greatest achievements in all of pro sports or competitive sports history.
100%.
Anyone who has
Absolutely.
ever tripped on acid and who knows how difficult, just by watching the game over the years, how difficult and rare it is to pitch a no-hitter.
That's Jimmy's
and-
focus.
It's amazing.
Right. Oh, no, absolutely. And by the way,
It's impossible.
even though my friends tried, okay, never ever. Okay, never ever. Or
So, Jimmy-
psilocybin.
Speaking of baseball,
I did all that shit.
I'm sure.
What's gonna happen
You're
with
a
baseball?
musician. You're supposed to be.
Yeah,
able
of
to-
course we what's going to happen with baseball? They're talking about this wacky, having centralized,
Geographical divisions.
Right.
You know what, guys? We can predict all we want. The real answer, it goes back to our favorite Dr. Fauci. The disease is going to dictate what happens in sports.
Right.
You can
Well,
do all
so
this.
far the
You can do all the social.
the
Go ahead.
Thailand
Go ahead.
Thailand baseball has started their season.
I know that. I watched 30 seconds of it the other night.
The bull riders came back last weekend, and there's a NASCAR race scheduled for later this month.
Correct.
Is that right?
With no
What
fans.
of
Yes.
women's beach volleyball? That's what I want to know.
That's difficult.
Yeah.
You can't do
What,
social
what about
distancing.
men's beach volleyball? Just women's? They want back. You don't care about the guys?
It would have to be
No.
single volleyball.
Men play volleyball?
Yes.
on the beach?
Yeah, they
Karch
do.
Karai,
Yeah.
Mr. Volleyball.
Karch Karai was great. He was a
interviewed
legend.
him.
That was a joke, guys.
Philip,
That was a joke.
I interviewed him. Karch
Did you?
Karai. Yes, I did. I've interviewed some of the coolest
I was at a
freaking
photo
people.
shoot where we photographed him. For I was doing advertising for a beachwear company back in the early 90s, and we photographed Karch Karai.
Very cool
So
guy.
you've interviewed a gazillion athletes.
Yes, I have.
And players, coaches, owners. Have you talked to them about cannabis much?
No,
And-
in fact, no, because I haven't, since I've come out of the cannabis closet over the last
Right.
couple of years.
Sure.
I have not, Chad. I have a few stories that I can't tell because they.
Oh, come on.
No, I can't be. I could say that he's a.
Betray
I
of
could say that
confidence. You
he's
can't do
a
that.
former hockey player who's in the media in Boston. That and the bar shut down one night, and we passed the joint to each other. But I can't. I'm not going to do it.
I understand.
Well, yeah.
I'm kidding. I wouldn't
You would never do
respect
that.
that. Respect that.
But
that's a symptom.
There's another story that I've not shared ever on a recorded basis. So I'm going to not name the name, but everybody in the world knows his name. Okay, and it happened to be the name of his show.
Okay.
And he was a stand-up comic before he became a household name with his show. Okay.
Jerry
Okay.
Seinfeld.
I didn't name that name, but Carol Leifer, his good friend,
I think we're getting somewhere.
grew up with wife number one. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay. All
Right?
right.
And you guys remember there's
Who
another
are
guy,
these
I'm not
people?
going to name the name, but he was the clerk in Pretty Woman. He too is a stand-up comic. And
I'm
sucking
with you.
up, sir.
I'm with you.
Sucking up, sir. That right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not naming his name, right?
No, no.
Oh, we excel at that, sir.
They were in the back seat. So wife number one picked me up. After that, I was covering the Red Sox. It was probably the Red Sox ALCS, 1986. Coming back from Fenway Park on a Sunday night, about 10 o'clock at night, they limo liner, luxury bus, luxury Greyhound, back to Portland, Maine. And wife number one picked me up and in the back seat are those three people. And I only named one. And I think I'll be okay with this. So, back then, LL Bean was a 24-hour destination in Maine. Yeah, they only had one store in the
I've
80s.
been there. Yeah, it's
Freeport,
Is that
Maine.
right?
And it was open 24 hours. So at 10:30, we smoked a joint. Let's go to LL Bean, of course.
Sure. Doesn't everybody?
Go
Buy
to
some
the hat
galoshes.
section with two of the funniest guys on earth. Okay, trying on those different hunting hats.
Who are high?
Oh, that's hilarious.
I mean, you've always your sides have hurt when you've laughed, right? We've all
Right.
gotten to the point
Right.
where we laughed so hard. I was bruised. I bruised the insides of myself. I was laughing so hard listening to the
That's
and of course,
That's
Carol
great.
goes on the PA. Carol Leifer goes on the PA and go, would Mr. S please come to the front? Your child we found your child.
Oops.
Yeah, they got that big giant boot out front.
Yeah. When I write my book, I'll use his name, but I'll probably talk to him before that. Because
Yeah, make sure it's cool.
Yeah. Please. And that's the thing about this now, guys, right? It's accepted as a medicine, okay? We have
Right.
33 states or whatever.
Mhm.
11, 12 states legalized this stuff. At some point, especially my kids' age group, 29-year-old,
Right.
he's going to grow up. It's going to be legal in his,
Yeah.
every state, and it's going to be a crop, and it's going to be traded on the commodities market, and
Yep.
there's going to be wholesale prices of this, and he's going to live to see that. I don't know if I can live beyond tomorrow, so I live, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
That's
Our kids
Now,
are the same age.
I'm wondering, now we were talking about it on the last episode, the idea that, we were talking earlier about how working from home is becoming more prevalent in the days of coronavirus because it's just not that scary anymore. People didn't want to do it before because they don't know how. But now, having been forced into it, it becomes something, well, we can do this. I wonder if that same effect isn't going to play out with regard to legalizing cannabis. We're eventually going to have to bow to the logic that you're not stopping anyone. Anyone who wants to smoke weed can get their hands on it, whether it's legal or illegal. But, eventually you're going to realize all of this money is going untaxed. And all of these people
Right.
are having their rights violated. And now that it's all kind of been in this pressure cooker of a lockdown, maybe we come out of this with people thinking, maybe it ain't such an evil weed.
Right. Well, I don't use that M word because it's a plant, and the M word has racist connotations to it. And I know that a lot of people are using that word as a differentiator between the hemp version of the cannabis plant and the THC version of the plant. And I try not to use that word, and yet it's part of it's part of this whole growth process that we're going through.
Yep.
Anyway, that's my thing.
Yeah, we asked Steve D'Angelo about that when we had him on recently, and he, because we said, yeah, we've heard you use the word a couple times, and he said, I can't help it. That's what we called it, and that's how I am. And Phil and Andrew, I think we grew up with that word. That's what we called it.
But I'm with you, Jimmy. I would prefer just to say cannabis or weed.
I agree.
I like
Part of the lexicon. I mean, weed. Well, we call ourselves Vote Pro Pot, and we use the term pot because we're on social networking, and it's a call to action, and there's only so many characters, and it's short and sweet.
I like that.
But we don't call it pot on our podcast.
Right.
We always would say cannabis, and if we're talking
The Beatles used to call it grass.
right, or we're talking medicinal or political, we use cannabis.
Yeah,
But if
and
we're sitting around talking, some guys, we might say marijuana or weed, but then you have the Marijuana Policy Project.
Right. Yeah.
I
Good
know.
point,
I
Andrew.
get it, and I refer to it as herb. I like herb.
There you go.
All right.
Showing your age, Jimmy, because that's what we used to call
All right,
it.
why do I show my age? I wear it on my sleeve. Okay?
Yeah, you and me both, bud.
It depends on the circumstance, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think.
By the way, I've never told those stories in a recorded environment.
Oh, you're gonna send us a cease and desist now?
No,
No, well, we're not going to release this for a while, and if you want to edit it out, all you have to do is say so. And,
That's right.
don't have
those are
time.
two of my greatest, two of my best stories.
That's great. So let me ask you this question.
I have
We'll
a
wrap things
story
up
about
here.
Jay. I have a story about Jay and I. We played a band job. This is like we were probably 19 years old, 18 years old, down in Washington D.C. at I forgot where it was, but we smoked some Thai stick.
Love it.
We drove from Washington to Rockville, which is normally, in traffic, maybe 45 minutes, half hour, something like that, maybe. In the middle of the night, it's a 20-minute drive. There's no light. It took us an hour and a half, 2 o'clock in the morning, to drive from D.C. to Rockville because we were so friggin' stoned.
And
We had to
40
pull
minutes
over.
of that was just that one green light.
Oh my god! Yeah.
It was a stop sign. We were waiting for the light to change at the stop
Waiting
sign.
for the stop sign to change to green.
Right.
It's 15 minutes after sitting there, Andrew's like, "Dude, are you gonna go?" I was like, "Waiting for the light to change." It's a stop sign. I never touched that shit again, man. That was scary.
Oh, gosh.
Well, we're getting low on time here. We won't keep you too long. Jimmy, let a couple more questions we might each have here. If you had to guess, what sport, major league sport, do you think would be the first to remove cannabis from the banned substances list? If you had to guess, hockey, basketball, baseball, football. Let's start there.
Of the major sports.
You didn't give me the sport that I would have picked.
Which one would you pick? Soccer? Yeah, I could see that.
FIFA was the first international group to take CBD off the test and not make it a banned substance.
Right.
And that was during the World Cup 2 years ago.
Right. Remember that.
What about the other four?
Is it four-
What
what's
about
that?
THC in the World Cup? It's still banned, right?
Yes.
What
Yeah,
about
You
the
think
other
that'll
four?
change?
I think
Bas-
that'll change. Yes.
Basketball, football,
That'd be one of the
baseball.
first things.
In
Hockey.
you know what?
I
Probably.
think it's hockey, maybe.
I think baseball's already made it just like alcohol, and I
Right.
see them all.
Right.
fall.
Nobody's going to get suspended from Major League Baseball for it now.
Correct. And that should be the case in all of the other leagues too, guys.
That makes sense.
It just does. And of all the sports, I never thought baseball would be the first of the big four to do it.
Really?
No, I didn't either.
And you know what? You know when it happened? It happened during MJ BizCon this year in December 2019.
Oh
I remember
yeah.
because I was doing a podcast. I was like, "Oh my god, check this out!" And we were doing a podcast. And we started talking about it. It was like, all right, so
Yeah, that was a biggie when that
that
happened.
was a biggie and
Yeah, it was a real
unexpected.
biggie.
That's why it came out of the blue. I was like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
great baseball! Wow, who'd have thinking the sport's going to die?"
Who'da thunk?
That's right.
So anyone got any other questions or anything?
Not really. Let's let Jimmy tell us where people can find you and
In my office, right here.
yeah, only in your office, at least currently. Yeah. No,
I'm lucky to have an office, guys, because she who must be obeyed, who owns the house that I'm in, okay? I built an office in her house, right? And
She who
corporate
must be
America,
obeyed.
she's a retired corporate America executive who's now doing coaching. Anyway, she basically said, I need a place to work. I'm going to be working in the office, which basically means you have to go find an office.
Hey, good luck with that.
That's right. No, it's great. 6 minutes from my house, guys. I mean, I could
that's
literally
cool.
go home. I could go home and go to the bathroom if I had to. You know
Oh,
what
that's
I'm saying?
great. That's
That
great.
close. So ProCannabisMedia.com is the website. ProCannabisMedia.com is the website. It's also our YouTube channel. We've got the Facebook page going. We now have a social media person who's actually going to be putting out content on a daily basis on our Instagrams and our Twitters, and you'll never find me on them, guys, but I do know that the information
They're
that I
there.
feed her, right, the information I feed her will be put up there. And of course, now featured on the homepage of cannabis.net, because Kurt Dalton and us we're partners on this Weed Talk adventure of ours. And the shows that we're doing now are all going to go under that Weed Talk umbrella, that Weed Talk moniker. So when we do it live, it'll be called Weed Talk Live.
gotcha.
The recorded version.
Oddly enough.
Right. The recorded
Clever.
versions are We Talk Now, because you're watching it now.
Now, right? The
And
live
then,
one.
of course, on Fridays, we release We Talk News at 4:20 in the afternoon. And
And let me guess, you're gonna present news?
correct.
Oh, okay.
But that's pre-recorded and
blown.
released.
Sharp. That Philip guy, he's a sharp dude.
That's,
huh?
man.
that's
Is that going to
Nothing
be
gets by
pre-recorded?
me.
That's
Is
right.
that gonna be
And Deborah-
pre-recorded?
By the way, Deborah Borchardt from Green Market Report is now our business reporter. She's contributing every week to our Weed Talk News, including tomorrow. I've already seen her report. I'll be putting it together tomorrow. And I'm going to
Fantastic.
I'll put this out there to you guys too. I
Great.
hope to live to see the day where I can produce a live news, talk, and roundup show on Fridays that will be at 4:20 in Eastern Time, continue to 4:20 Central Mountain and West Coast time eventually, okay? And have 15-minute reports from each state. So we'll go to the Massachusetts report, to the Maine report, to the Maryland report, to the DC report. You get it?
Yeah, that's great.
Simple concept.
Absolutely.
And everybody, and it's going to be called Cannabis Coast to Coast. And that's why we did the Weed Talk News show on Fridays at 4:20, because we think this is the precursor to that show. And I'm already shopping for sponsors. And I happen to think that Curaleaf's Cannabis Coast to Coast sounds really good.
It sounds great.
It's got a ring to it. Definitely has a ring to it. Well, you are in the process of building an empire, and we are really glad to play any small part that comes our way with that. And we are very very glad to have you as our guest today. It's been some of the most lively conversation we've had, and that's saying something.
A lot of fun. A lot of fun, Jimmy.
Thank you very, very much. And you know what? We're beyond just guests on each other's shows now. I'm going to come down and visit you sometime in the spring if we ever get a chance.
Wear your mask, buddy, and gloves.
All right, and we'll definitely get together when I'm down there.
Yeah, man, I'll buy you a drink.
Absolutely,
Sounds great.
And I know I'll be making a trip up to Boston in the near future. I did a Comic-Con not too long, a couple of years ago. I was selling a book. Sold out, which is nice. But I haven't been up to Boston in a couple of years. It's a great town. Went to college in Boston. And Berkeley College of Music.
Oh, of course.
Boylston and Mass Ave.
Yep, we saw Gato Barbieri there in 1979, I think, and it was awesome.
I was there then. I wasn't at the concert, but I was at Berkeley.
Right, I know a lot of kids, really talented kids. I love the Berkeley kids. Yeah.
Yep, good school. So we definitely have to get some suds while I'm up there.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show, Jimmy. I know we really wanted this to be wall-to-wall sports and cannabis. But I think we probably talked a little bit more about cannabis than we did sports.
Well, it was a lot of Jimmy, which is even better.
We'll do it again soon, buddy.
Thank you for enlightening us.
Appreciate it. And I went 3 for 3 on those questions, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Shut up.
That's right.
Yeah. And these guys got them all right too once you got yours. So.
I got the goose egg. Yeah, once you got that's right.
Jimmy, thanks for being here, and let's stay connected. And anything Vote Pro Pot can do for you, seriously, let us know. We plug you on the show, and we'll continue to.